of things and make sure that everyone saw this. It's a statement from Richard Sauber. His statement reads, as the president said, he takes classified information and materials seriously. And as we have said, we have cooperated from the moment we informed the archives that a small number of documents were found, and we will continue to cooperate. We have cooperated closely with the Justice Department throughout its review, and we will continue that cooperation with the special counsel. We are confident that a thorough review will show that these documents were inadvertently misplaced, and the president and his lawyers acted promptly upon discovering of this mistake.
Happy MLK Day weekend. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and this is The Deal. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this week. If you're listening via podcast or catching us on the website, remember to let people know about the program. We're trying to build this program so you can subscribe on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your fine podcasts. As you saw in the lead into the program, Karine Jean-Pierre, the president's press secretary, on Thursday afternoon delivered some remarks and about a number of topics, but clearly one of the big topics was the discovery of classified records in the White House when President Biden left the White House. Some at University of Pennsylvania where he was teaching, and apparently some maybe even at one of his residences. Clearly, the Republicans are going to make as much hay out of it as possible. But there's a special prosecutor that's been assigned, so we'll leave that there. But I probably want to go back and talk about it at some point before the end of the show. But I do have to tell you on the programming note, Val Atkinson is off this weekend for the MLK weekend. But we have a special correspondent, Cherelle James, who will be making appearances on the program throughout the year. And she also co-hosts Connections with me on WFXC and WFXK FM in Raleigh, Durham. Hey, Cherelle, welcome to The Deal.
So happy to be here with you, Ed. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to this year and what this year brings on The Deal.
Well, I hope you're here for more than 1 year, but, I hope it's a long-term relationship. But, Cherelle, listening to Karine Jean-Pierre and talking about President Biden, in a number of the clips that we're leading in the intro, we've been in a lot of political turmoil in this country for a while. I'll go as far as to say that we've never not been without political turmoil, but it just seems particularly acrimonious right now. And I've been trying to figure out, how I feel about things, and particularly how to get ourselves in a better mind frame. And so I know you're not prepared for this, but I'm going to throw something out to you. I've been thinking a lot about how to change our mindset. And so one of the things I want to talk about this weekend, is MLK Weekend. I want to talk about some positive stuff. Obviously, we're going to go back and talk about some new stuff at the end of the program. And then also on the programming, just so people know, we have an interview that you did with Katie Lawson, who's a tax attorney. And we previewed a little bit of that last week, and that'll be in the second segment, so people can get some really good tax advice. But I'm just talking about some life advice right now. And one of the things you do that people might not know, so I want you to tell the audience about you a little bit. But I do want to talk about this whole notion of how we can be in a better mind frame for the upcoming year. Not necessarily a New Year's resolution, but some other things that we've talked about off mic before in the last week.
Yeah. Crazy times, crazy years. I know when I grew up and just the things we dealt with then and thinking about things now. And, I think about the blessings and the unfortunates at the age that I am today. But when we look at that, definitely we want to talk about and we want to kind of say, okay, but what's my part in this, right? What's my part, or what can I control? What's in my purview? And I think that we can get so overwhelmed with what's happening in the world, what's happening from day to day, that type of thing. And so one of the ways that I kind of bring that in to be able to control as much as I can. We can't control everything. So I don't want to put that out there that we could just control everything, but we cannot. And so I think about, especially in the beginning of the year or in life-changing situations, what's my one word that I kind of form my life around in a lot. And last year I chose the word legacy, and I continued that word this year, legacy. But let me just explain that one word thing first. And that is having a focus. I think that sometimes we're easy to be distracted. We're easy to be affected by everything around us and kind of be very sensitive to everything because we don't have that focus in our own life, inner self. And so for me, that one word allows me to kind of draw back to me first before I give out and before I stepped in anything else, and kind of focus on, okay, what does that look like for me? And so for me, I chose the word legacy last year. I said I'm going to continue it this year. I think that when I look at that, it just helps me say, when I walk in a room, when I leave a room, when I decide a yes, when I decide a no in my life, period, you know, whether it's personal, whether it's business, what no matter community, it doesn't matter what it is. Does it get me to this goal of creating the legacy that I want to live for my life? And that's kind of how I came around that one word legacy, to kind of bring everything back in and not be so sensitive to reacting to every single thing that's happening in society.
Yeah, so the voice that you're hearing, that's Cherelle James. She's the co-host on Connections with me on Sundays on WFXC and WFXK in the Raleigh-Durham market. And she's now a special correspondent on the deal. She's not Val Atkinson. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, she looks a lot better than Val. But on top of that, Cherelle, I hear what you're saying about that one word. I mean, that's a good idea. Let's step back a little bit even further. You talked about your business, trying to get focused and that kind of thing. Tell people about what else you do besides hang out with me over here on the deal and over on Connections, because I think it'll help frame things a little bit better as we continue this discussion.
Sure, absolutely. So in my life outside of Ed Clark, I am the CEO and co-founder of my local CFO, and CFO stands for Chief Financial Officer. I always say to people that you have CEOs in a company and then you have a CFO. So CEOs of operations, CFO is kind of over the finances of a company. And so small and medium-sized businesses don't necessarily have the pleasure of having a CFO like corporations. And so we come in and help them out so that they can move forward. So it's a lot of strategy inside of that. It's not necessarily bookkeeping, but more of the strategic analyzations and where you're going and how you're going to get there. And that's kind of what my life is. Anyone that talks to me, you come to me, it's going to be, okay, well, what's the strategy? Whether it's a family member or a friend or a client, it's okay, well, let's figure this out and let's create the strategy around it so you can produce where you want to go or the result that you're looking to get. And that's kind of what I've been doing on a day-to-day basis for the last 11 years. And I love it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and again, you're encountering people all the time that, you said small, medium-sized business. And the reason why you go into business clearly is to make money, but it's also this whole legacy thing, leaving something for other folks. And I had a very interesting discussion today, and this will also presage a upcoming guest. His name is Kurt Smith. He's a professor of forestry at NC State University. And like, why would you meet a professor of forestry at NC State? Well, he's actually doing some research on Black folks who have lost wealth and lose their land and all that due to all this development that's going on in places like North Carolina. Clearly, we're heard from people all over America and all over the world. Our program is, at least we get people in the UK and all kind of other places. And when you have communities that are going through gentrification, changing, whatever. A lot of times the people who had property and land but aren't as savvy on the estate planning and those kind of things, they end up losing it. Uh, Trying to get people to understand that having that generational wealth is a part of your legacy. It's not just people remembering you when you're dead, right? I mean, so talk to me a little bit about sort of that financial part of it. How do we get people more engaged into thinking about, how do you not only acquire wealth but keep it, maintain it, and then pass it on?
I think that for as long as I've been doing this, and even before then, this is my personal life, you have this love or hate relationship with when we talk about finances and money, and it becomes a scary thing, like, oh, I don't want to deal with that, because it may be the lack of, in a lot of instances. It's not, I have all of this abundance and I want to do something with it. It really is, I'm trying to make ends meet, or I have enough with a little left over. And so you think that, well, there's nothing I can do. I just have enough for today and maybe a little bit for tomorrow for a lot of people. And when we look at things like that, then we're already putting ourselves in the box and kind of behind the 8-ball. It's really, really, when I talk about loving your finances and loving the numbers that come with your life, I say all the time, when I do talks, I tell everyone, I start off by saying, look around the room. Just look around wherever you are, via Zoom, where you're on Zoom, whether you're in the room together, even if you're watching us today, no matter where you are, just look around where you are. Every single thing you see has a price to it, even you. And a lot of people say, no, I'm free, my love is free, things of that nature. But can you give it at the time and rate that you want to? And most of the time you can't, because you're running off, right, to go make that other dollar. And so if we can then change that, I'd asked my husband a couple years ago, I said, what would you do if money started chasing you rather than you chasing after money? And he said, I would just stop. Exactly. And that's when we talk about generational wealth, and we talk about getting your hands around. It's not to look at what you don't have, is to see where you are so you can be empowered and you can create the strategies around where you are to where you want to go. But until we understand where we are and what we have in our hands, and then look at the resources on top of that, because I do think that a lot of time we have more resources, and I'm not just talking about dollars, but resources, our network, our community, the resources that we have around us. We don't consider them as assets as well. And they can help you get that knowledge that you need, the education. Like you said, we may not know what to do, but for me, we're in 2023, Google, and I'm not saying everything is real on the internet, but you could do and get some type of knowledge about anything that you want to know, to get enough to know what the next step is or where to go, right, to obtain whatever it is. And I think that we're not doing that. We kind of sit in, this is all I have, this is all I know. And if it comes around, I might grab it. But we're not thinking about that future. We're thinking only about today, which allows us to talk about, this is all I have, this is all I know. If it comes, I'll grab it. But when you start thinking generationally, when you start thinking beyond you, when you start thinking not just about today, but tomorrow, it makes you move differently. It makes you think differently, and it makes you want to act differently, because now you're realizing that, okay, my actions today dictate tomorrow, because whatever's happening today, guess what? You can't change it. It's today. But you can always change that tomorrow, whether it be for you or for those generations that are coming after you. Are you creating that platform that they could step on, a new foundation that they can have so that they can move forward? And I really think when we talk about generational wealth, we have to start thinking about it in that way, but also in your life, what is it? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? And I tell people all the time, and I want to just say this, Ed, really quick, is you are enough right where you are. You are enough right where you are. And I think so often we don't feel like we're enough right where we are. But in order to be where you want to be, right, it's going to take some of those changes, and that's where that thinking forward, and not just about today, not just about this week, but thinking forward plays a part of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great message for MLK weekend. You know, a lot of times we get so caught up in wanting a quick fix or to win the lottery or that there's some magic formula or whatever, or thinking that you're not capable yourself and it's already there. You have all the tools that you need. And I think that's a lot of the message of Martin Luther King. The whole content of your character thing, people misuse it all the time. He was saying that you're capable of being anything or anybody you want to be. Other people are preventing you from doing that. And at the time, it was by law, right? We couldn't do things because colored people couldn't vote or whatever. So we're at a different time. Hey, you know what? I think that's a good time to take a break. And I think, again, it's a perfect framing for MLK Weekend to talk about legacy. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about a number of things related to money, to making yourself better people. We're going to talk about wills and estates coming up. We're also going to talk about this whole notion of Black folks losing their land due to not having, wills and that kind of thing. So we got a lot of stuff coming up in the next few weeks. Stay right there. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, you're going to see an interview that Cherelle did with Katie Lawson, who's a tax attorney. And we talked to her on Connections last weekend, and you'll see that. And then after that, we'll come back and we'll wrap it up and we'll talk about some of the events in the news, and we'll finish up on this discussion about legacy. So we'll be right back after this message.
You think I'm pretty without any makeup on?
You think I'm funny when I get the punchline wrong.
I know you get me, so I let my walls come down. Before you met me, I was all right. But things were kind of heavy. You brought me to life.
Now every February, you'll be my Valentine. Valentine.
Let's go all the way tonight. No regrets, just love. We can
dance until we die, you and I.
We'll be young forever. You make me
Feel like I'm living a teenage dream. I can't sleep.
Let's run away and don't ever look back.
Don't ever look back.
Don't ever look back.
Don't ever look back. Don't ever look back. Don't ever look back.
I want to remind you, you're watching The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Katie Lawson with the Katie Lawson, K. Lawson Law Firm over in Durham, North Carolina. We're so happy to have her in with us on The Deal because I was a dumb tax person, Katie Lawson. I should have called you when I had my tax issues, and I did not. So let me ask you this. I have a tax problem, and I pick up the phone and I call the IRS. Am I putting myself at risk by talking to IRS without talking to you? Is it safe for me to talk to the IRS without having an attorney?
Yes, it's safe for you to talk to the IRS. The state of North Carolina, not so much. But the IRS is pretty much it's a regulatory agency. And all they want to do is to make sure that you contact them. Now, if you don't have the means to hire an accountant, tax attorney, enrolled agent, it's always good to, do it yourself. Do not bury your head in the sand, because by doing that, by doing nothing, the impact from the IRS is going to be much worse. Now, I do want to caution you. Sometimes you get some of the agents from the IRS, they're going to try to give you I call it the hard sell. Pretty much, you got to enter into this payment plan. You got to pay thousands of dollars per month, and that's it. That is not the case. If someone tries to pressure you into one of those type of payment plans, hang up the phone, because what the IRS has to do, and this is by law, is that they have to give you allowances for reasonable expenses, for your monthly expenses. And they have to take a look at your income versus your disposable income to make sure that you are able to afford to make a payment to the IRS per month. And it has to be an affordable payment. They cannot demand that you pay them thousands of dollars a month, whereas you cannot pay your house payment. And I've seen that before, where they'll tell someone, well, the minimum payment that we can take is $2,500 per month. That's not true. Keep in mind that person on the phone is going by the IRS collection standards. And in those collection standards, they want to try to collect the tax liability in the least amount of time possible.
The Matlock of tax attorney is what I've always called her, almost for day one, and she's really good at what she does, and she's very knowledgeable, so I call her all the time. But Katie is amazing, and she, tax attorney, that means that she understands tax law, but she also understands just the nuances of taxes itself, right? So there's a legal aspect and then there's a financial aspect, and she is at the crux of it, of both of those, of bringing them all together. And so she is definitely someone that you want on your side before you get in trouble, but definitely when you're in trouble. And that's Katie Lawson, attorney Katie Lawson.
Katie, because we're right around the corner from tax time, and people will be getting their W-2s. And I'm going to ask you a real practical question right off the bat, not one of those hard attorney questions. I'll leave those for Cherelle. But, a lot of people feel like, you get this W-2 form and you immediately run to one of the tax preparation companies and you give away a lot of your money by using those firms. But there is a risk of doing your own tax. So here's the softball question for you. When do you tell people it's probably a good time to do your own taxes, or at least look at using some of the online things as opposed to, going to one of those tax preparation companies?
So if you have a simple tax return, let's say if you have income from W-2 employment, and that's your only source of income, then that's fine to use one of those, to use a tax software. And a lot of them are good. A lot of them are great. And they have questions that will walk you step by step to make sure that you maximize your refund from a W-2 job. Now, it becomes a little complicated. Let's say if you add other sources of income, be it rental property, if you're starting to operate a small business, I would navigate elsewhere to a tax professional. And I guess I'm going to say this, and I'm probably going to step on a couple toes, but that's what I do. Not all tax preparation businesses are the same. So the thing is that when you're choosing a tax preparer, when you're choosing someone to prepare your taxes, you want to make sure that they're knowledgeable, and you want to make sure it's not a fly-by-night. And especially if you're operating a small business, you want to make sure that they are familiar with your business, the type of deductions that you will that you are entitled to. And you want to check to make sure that the person that is preparing your tax return that person has experience preparing that type of tax return. And you want to also look and see how long that person has preparing tax returns. A lot of these firms have individuals that prepare tax returns on a part-time basis. Basically, they just take a class online and go in and start preparing tax returns. That doesn't equate to the knowledge that's needed when your tax return becomes complicated.
That's absolutely true. Katie, I just want to clarify. I'm going to throw a second softball as we're getting this thing rolling here. Because I see a lot of people that they're either going to some of those fast, quick tax preparation places, or they're just thinking, I need a CPA. But tax preparation is, you don't necessarily have to be a CPA to be a tax preparer. And can you shed some light on when do you go to like a CPA? When would we come to a tax attorney, to help with that versus just your regular tax preparer?
So, and Cherelle, you are correct. You don't necessarily need a CPA to prepare your taxes. So the CPA designation means certified public accountant. What it is that that's necessary for you to, or for the CPA or accountant to certify documents before the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, a federal agency. Now, not all CPAs are tax preparers, and not all CPAs know how to prepare taxes. There are CPAs that specialize in various fields, like nonprofit accounting, cost accounting, managerial accounting. So you want to, just because a person is a CPA, that person doesn't need to prepare your taxes. You want to make sure that you are looking for a tax preparer that has the skill and the knowledge as far as preparing taxes. And that may not necessarily be a CPA. It can be an accountant. And I've seen some accountants that will run circles around CPAs.
People are starting to get their W-2s in the mail, and we want to give you useful information so that you don't waste your money, and you also don't end up in front of a judge in a federal court trying to explain your taxes. So Katie, here's the thing. Okay, so you complete your taxes, you send them in, and then talk to me about who gets audited. Now, because one of the things that we learned recently is that this guy that used to live at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Donald Trump, he was supposed to have gotten audited, but he didn't. Joe Biden got audited, Barack Obama got audited, Jimmy Carter got audited, the Bushes got audited, but this Trump guy did not. But a lot of times, little people who don't have a whole lot end up in that situation, and they don't have the money for, or don't think they have the money or resources for a tax attorney. So what do you tell somebody as they're filling out their taxes? Doesn't the federal government already know? Doesn't the IRS already know a whole bunch about you anyway? I mean, how, talk to me about,
they do know a whole lot about you, because basically all of your income is reported directly to them. If you're a W-2 employee, it's reported to the Social Security Administration, and then reported to the IRS. Anyone issues you a 1099, it's reported to the IRS. So they know a whole lot about you. But the tax system that we have here in the United States is called a voluntary tax system. And what that means is that instead of the government assessing a blanket tax against everyone, they're saying, we're going to give you the opportunity to voluntarily report to us to get it right on your own. Now, if you don't get it right, then of course, the audit man cometh. But the way that it's explained in the IRS code, in the law, and with the IRS, is that the audit process is random. I've been practicing in tax law for over 15 years. It's not really random. So they said it's based on a score. Every time you file a tax return, your tax return is assessed a score. The higher the score, the higher the probability that you will be audited. Now, if you run a small business, your probability of being audited doubles. And that's the small business owners. It's pretty much the middle class of this country. And then, we pay the most taxes. As far as the guy at 16, the last tenant at 1600, the previous tenant at 1600 Pennsylvania, I do believe at some particular point there may have been some back end deals or money exchange in hand somewhere. I don't want to, say that on record, but it sounds to me it's very fishy. Because if every other president that has ever that has ever served in this country turned over a tax return, that their returns were open and audited, why not his?
Yeah, why not his? You call her the Matlock of tax attorneys, is that right, Cherelle?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, so we got Matlock in the house this morning, and she's been giving us some great information about taxes and the law, and like I said, we'll give you some information on how to contact her if you have some issues with your taxes. But I know, Cherelle, you had some other questions for Katie, so I'll throw it to you and let you talk to Kate.
I just want to talk about this a little bit, Katie, and get your take on it, because it brought everyone to such an uproar coming into the new year. Last year, they changed the law that fintech companies, we're talking about PayPal, any of those, a Cash App, if you made over $600 in your business PayPal or Cash App account, or any of the other ones, that you were going to get a 1099 that had to be reported. And I know for a lot of small business owners and a lot of people in general that just had those side hustles, right? But they had that account. That was like, wait a minute, what does this mean? And what's going to happen? And what does that mean for my taxes and all of this other stuff? Well, we know that they delayed it this year. They've delayed it for a year. But what do people need to know about it? And give us your take on that.
Yeah, they delayed the requirement for a year, but however, some of the fintech companies, they've already been reporting on 1099s. Even if it's your side hustle, if you're receiving money through Cash App or PayPal, and a lot of people do at this particular point, if you make $600 or more, then that is considered taxable income. And that makes you a small business owner by default. And at that particular point, you will need to report that income on your tax return. However, being a small business owner by default, you are able to deduct your business expenses from that money. So that will actually lessen the tax burden, but it also requires you to keep pretty good records. For example, let's say if we have someone that's actually baking cakes on the side as a side hustle. They're baking cakes for different types of events, or for family members, friends, co-workers, so forth and so on. You're going to have to start keeping up with your expenses, your receipts, as far as when you buy those items from the grocery store, because it's all going to make a difference in your bottom line.
Mm. So let me just ask you this, because I know we have a lot of nonprofits or associations where they may not have, and I don't say associations more so than anything, where they have like chapters. And inside of that chapter, they have someone who is just old school way, right? I just opened up a Cash App or opened up a PayPal account for you guys to use. So it's in my name, but now all of that money is funneling through. What are they supposed to do now?
Oh, and that actually happened at my church. They opened up a Cash App and did not tell me, had no knowledge, and it was in the pastor's name and social. He received the 1099. So we ended up having to call Cash App and have the and had the account transferred to the church, to the church's tax ID number. So be careful when you're doing those types of things. My advice is to always make sure, if you're doing it for any type of business, any type of nonprofit, make sure that you open the account in the business or nonprofit name using the nonprofit or business's tax ID number.
Because, not your personal social.
Yeah, because the thing is that someone as a private person, it's taxable to them, but of course a nonprofit does not pay income taxes. So that money is not taxable to them. So you just always want to make sure you're reporting in the correct way.
Well,
Good stuff. Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, I want to remind folks you're listening to Connections on Foxy 107, 104, and that's Katie Lawson. You've been hearing talking about, and I'm Katie. I'm so glad you're here because I know a lot of the people in this audience are entrepreneurs. They have associations with their church where they're doing functions at their church or their civic organization and all that. So I'm absolutely glad that you brought up that point because I hadn't thought about that. And clearly, even the folks at your church didn't think about it at first, and could have led to Reverend having to be personally responsible for some stuff. In that same vein, you're a small business and you're just starting out, and again, money's tight or whatever. Does it make sense to have a tax attorney on retainer, or how do you go about, making sure you're covered for those things? Because I didn't think about that at all, but that's a very significant and very good question, Cherelle. And there's thousands of small business owners in our audience that are probably didn't realize any of the stuff you just said.
Now, and I know with a small business that money's tight, you may not have the resources to have a tax attorney or an accountant on staff. But you do need to have some connections as far as a network of individuals that you can reach out to, a network of professionals that you can reach out to. Even if it's people in your industry that have been in business longer than you have, reach out to them and they'll tell you, they will share the information and let you know what needs to be done. I always, and I've given this speech to the community college, the area community colleges a number of times. I always advise that every small business assemble what I call a bail team. That's a banker. Make sure you have a relationship with a business banker, an accountant, an insurance agent, and a lawyer. Just make sure you have connections with at least those those professionals that you can bounce questions off of, and it will make a world of difference. That's not going to cost you a whole lot of money. And let's say if a lawyer, if you need to contact a lawyer, you wouldn't have to have them on a retainer. I would say that the highest cost would be like a consultation fee. And that's probably $150 to about $300 just for a consultation. And you can get a lot of your questions answered in a consultation.
At the time, I just wasn't thinking. I used social media to vent. I wish I would have thought about the effects of scaring people. I didn't mean for that to happen. People took it as a terrorist threat. The university got shut down. I got arrested by the FBI. And now, I don't know what my future looks like. I search my name on the web almost every day and look at the stuff. It's not going away. Think before you post.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. That is Cherelle James. It's not Val Atkinson. And this is the deal. And in the second segment, Cherelle, we talked to Katie Lawson, who's a very fine tax attorney in Durham, North Carolina. So if you got tax problems, you may want to call up Katie Lawson because number one, and you've been knowing her for a while, Cherelle, that she's very personable and easy to talk to, or whatever. And I think she's an attorney for the right reason, right?
Yeah, she is. I told you I was in business for 11 years. I've known her probably the 9 or 10 years, after starting, and we have had an instant connection. We've done some trainings together and for different people and universities and things of that nature. And she definitely is in it to make sure that people understand what their rights are and that they're not being taken advantage of by anyone, including the government in that way. And so she goes to bat and fights for you. And she knows the law inside and out. Like, you could not have a better person. And I've enjoyed working with her hand in hand as we've shared some clients together and things of that nature. So it was a pleasure having Katie on. It was my inaugural session, as you mentioned, with connections. And what better way to celebrate than to have a good girlfriend that's doing some great things in her own business and in her own right in tax law.
Yeah. So, and we will have some of that information on the website and stuff with her phone number and how to get in touch with her. So we hope that you don't have tax problems, but if you do, call Katie Lawson. Back to this whole thing about legacy. I do want to talk about that some more, but one of the other clips that was in the opening today, and it really bothered me, and there hasn't been much on the news about it. I mean, you know how these things happen. I think we're so desensitized to violence and all that kind of stuff. There was a 6-year-old in the first grade, brought a gun to school, Cherelle, and shot his teacher. Now, I don't know all the backstory because, again, I don't think they've covered it very well in the news. But whatever the story is, I'm trying to imagine a 6-year-old having enough animus towards somebody to think that it's okay to bring a gun to school. And again, this is MLK Weekend, and we're always, hearing the "I Have a Dream" speech and talking about content of your character, talk about a letter from Birmingham jail and all those kind of things. And you want to think that the world's moved well past all those things that, King and Malcolm X and those folks were trying to fight for. What does this story about a 6-year-old with a gun tell us about where we are? I know it's a big question, but we talk about big things, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
but
no,
how does it make you feel?
It makes me feel sad. And it makes me feel a little and sad. Let me tell you why I say sad. Because a 6-year-old felt comfortable enough to bring a gun to school and to shoot his teachers who was protecting the other classmates, right? And I say that because as a world, and I said earlier, I mentioned, growing up, the time I grew up and the time now, and this kind of ties into what I was meaning by that is, when I grew up, and I'm not saying everything was 100% all right, and there's some things that definitely needed to be pushed forward as we're in this weekend, but we've lost, when we talk about being desensitized, we've lost what my grandmother would call couth. That's that old word, couth. We've lost that integrity and that character and some of the things that we're used to seeing. When I grew up with guns. I'm from a military family, and I grew up, I knew how to put a weapon together. I knew how to take it apart. I knew how to clean it. I knew how to do all of those things. But I also knew those things in the center. I wasn't 6. So let me be very clear. I was not 6 when that happened, but they were put up properly, and so I'm not blaming any parents because I don't know the situation. So it's not on them. This is a general talk here. One, when we talk about gun safety, there has to be gun safety. That's a reason, right? That things are locked and put up in certain places. For a 6-year-old to get it, I can't imagine. Number 2, then the knowledge around it of that this can be a weapon, that it can hurt other people. And I think that when we talk about, I'm going to go there, and when we talk about a lot of the video games and the different things that people play all the time, I think that desensitizes us from what's real and what's not real. And I'm talking about from a 6-year-old mind, right? Not an adult who knows this is real, this is a game, this is what I'm playing. But from that 6-year-old mind, if I can play these games, and again, I'm not talking about this 6-year-old because I don't know, but just in general, I know kids who play some of those games. If I can play that game and it's real and the people look real and the technology's at a point now that back in our day, a character looked like a character, it didn't look like a real person. But I can play those games, and what's the difference if I take this and go to school? They'll be fine. I'll just reset and come back tomorrow and everything will be okay. And I don't know what his mind frame was, the 6-year-old's mind frame was, but I look at all of those things in our society now, and you have to kind of wonder, and you kind of have to sit back of, freedom is not free. Let me just say that. Freedom is not free. And how much of freedom do we allow to continue? And how much does that impose on the next person? And I'll leave with this, Ed, and turn it back over to you, is, my freedom, your freedom ends where mine begins. And so we could get into a thing about the right to carry arms, bear arms, and all of that stuff. I'm not going there. I just told you I grew up in a family of that. And then I was law enforcement officer. So I really understand a lot of that in a lot of ways. And yes, to this sidebar, Ed, I've had a lot of experience in this lifetime of different experience. But so I understand all of that from a safety perspective. But the mindset of the kid, I have to go to what were they able to do on a day-to-day basis? What was happening in the household to make it feel it was okay to take it to school and to shoot, regardless of who it was, to actually shoot someone with it. It lends a lot of questions for me, and it just creates sadness in my heart.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And again, over the course of this season, we plan on having police chiefs in here to talk about some of these issues and people in law enforcement, because I saw a video just today. I hadn't seen it, but it was a school teacher from Washington D.C. who was visiting in L.A. and he ended up dead back on the 3rd of January. Apparently he was having some sort of mental health crisis. And again, instead of the police helping him, he ends up dead. And those are all too common. But at the same time, you make a good point about, society needing to be safe and all that. You have law enforcement background, you have military experience in your family, like a lot of us do. And so we have to try to balance those things, right? And that 6-year-old story just really did something to me, because I can't even imagine. I got grandkids, and I'm thinking, at 6 years old, I don't even know what I was thinking about. Probably Bugs Bunny, and maybe not even Bugs Bunny. Maybe just Sesame Street. Bugs Bunny may have been too much for me, and to think that he brought a gun to school. Anyway, you're listening to The Deal. So if you're on Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you subscribe to The Deal, I hope you tell other people and get them to subscribe, because this season is packed with a whole bunch of stuff. It's also packed with Cherelle James, who is in with us today. Val's not here. He's taking a weekend off. I gave him a weekend off because he works too hard. Cherelle, the other thing, as we talk about reality or break from reality, is this Representative Santos from New York. This fellow is an odd fellow. He pretty much has lied about every single thing. I mean, nothing about this guy is real. And not only that, he's saying that he's not going to leave Congress or whatever. Have you followed that story any at all? And what do you think about this Representative Santos?
Surprising to me. In today's society, it's not surprising. I say that because really, truly, we easily give a title to someone really quick. We're quick to accept someone. When we've been talking all day about kind of back in the day and now, it took a little bit of time, right, and research, and we kind of fact check some things. But now we live in a world with alternative facts. Just because it's your fact is not my fact. Just because I know you, or and that's not new. If I know you, so you do this, but it is new in the sense of, we're not going to dot I's and cross T's. We're just going to, it's just going to be okay. It's all right. Just don't worry about it. It's all right. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And I think in that sense, it's not shocking to me, which is, again, sad. I guess that's my word for today. It's not shocking to me at all, because it's a lot of the world we live in now. When we talk about should he resign and things of that nature, yes, we should, but we live in a different world. We live in a different world where we're 2 years from January 6th, which that wouldn't have happened before. We live in a world where congressmen can lie about who they are and their resume and kind of get the job and be there where they are. It's just a different time, and I don't. It's almost surreal. I think so. To me, it's just surreal.
Yeah, surreal is a good word for it. In the time we have left here, I want to go back to this notion of legacy. I'm struck by that word because I think about that all the time myself. I don't want it to be that I'm laying in a box and everybody say, "Hey, there's a good guy over there in the box," and that's not the same as legacy. That's just somebody remembering you at your funeral, or saying some nice words over your corpse. Not to be morbid, but MLK had a legacy, right? A real one, because we are here doing some things that we could not have done had he not sacrificed his life. I mean, he was murdered. Have you, so this is a way to sort of bring things home. Have you been to Memphis before? Have you ever been to the Lorraine Motel or whatever? If you haven't, I would suggest you go, because that's the surreal thing. Because you brought in the word surreal. The surreal thing was I was standing there on the balcony and I'm looking across there and I'm like, and then you can go over to the boarding house where supposedly James Earl Ray was when he shot King, and you see the distance between the 2 points and how clear a shot it would have been to kill him and all that kind of thing. And to think about all the political violence that went on in the late 60s or in the 60s period and into the 70s, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all these people. And we talk a lot about how bad things are now. Just imagine how bad things were, that people were being murdered on a regular basis out in the open in broad daylight. That doesn't tend to happen now, but things happen like gentrification. And whole communities are torn up. Things happen. I just saw that in LA, a bank had to pay $31 million because they were still redlining to this day in Los Angeles, and they would not put a bank branch in a Black neighborhood, and that had mortgage services in it. They only had check cashing services in the bank in the Black neighborhood, but in the white neighborhoods, they had mortgage services, those kind of things. So I've said a whole bunch, but again, as we think about MLK Weekend and we think about legacy, what's the important things that you want people to know about Martin Luther King, but not just Martin Luther King, but all those people who were working hard so that we could have what we have now?
Well, we are here on the shoulders of our ancestors, those who preceded us. And I think that we don't talk about that enough anymore in a lot of situations. We're here on their shoulders. The freedoms that we have, I talked earlier about freedoms not free, the freedoms that we have, the knowledge that we're able to gain, the voting that we're able to do, the go in a restaurant and sit in the front seat. We're here on the shoulders of those before us who fought for those things. And in the same way, when you think about your life, me thinking about mine, you about yours, and each individually who's watching from wherever or listening, you have to say, well, it's every decision I make creates my legacy. It either takes away or adds to in a positive or negative way, but it's creating the legacy that when I'm in that pine box that you talked about, that's not when legacy is created. It's what you do every day when you're on the earth. It's what you do in every room you walk in, that intentionality that you have about your day, about how you're going to act, your character. We talked about that earlier, character and the integrity that you're going to have, because that's what creates your legacy. I think about a graduate of Elizabeth City State University, which is at HBCU. in North Carolina, and I think about all of the alumni that came before me and them giving back to the school, right? And this is just anything in life. So if they didn't support or didn't take good care of that university, when it was my turn, it wouldn't be there. It's the same thing with our earth. It's the same thing with our households, our families, our communities, and whatever your world may be. It could be the whole world. It could be just whatever your world is beyond your community. What are you doing to solidify and take care of it so that beyond you, someone can say, if it wasn't for X, Y, or Z, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have this. I think that we have a problem of always wanting to start from ground zero. And we shouldn't always have to start from ground zero. There should be a foundation, as I mentioned before, a foundation that's built before us, and the next generation builds it a little bit higher so that each generation is doing much better than the generation before. And now when we talk about the generational wealth, I think about all the things that our ancestors accomplished, and they didn't have half the rights, half the resources, and half the knowledge that we have today. They didn't have access to those things. And, they were suppressed. And they accomplished so much. When you talk about generational wealth and land, and I know we're going to talk about this in some other segments, but land that's been through the years, 50, 60 plus years, think about what it took for them to get that, for us to have it now and take advantage of it and don't take care of it and let it last. Those are the things that I'm talking about when we talk about generational and legacy. When we talk about that legacy, it is generational. It's a legacy of being African-American, right? It's a legacy of being a woman. It's a legacy of being a man. It's a legacy of being American. It's a legacy of whatever encompass your world and what builds you to be who you are. All of those things, you have impact from a legacy perspective to make sure the next person coming up has an easier road, a better road, or at least the road is still there for them to be able to travel.
Yeah, wow. You said a mouthful there. Great discussion this week, and I'm glad you had the opportunity to join us. Remember, Katie Lawson was with us in the second segment. We talked about tax stuff, so if you got some tax issues, make sure you hit up Katie. Her information is going to be on the website. Make sure you come back and catch Cherelle and I on Connections on Foxy 107, 104, Sunday mornings at 7:45. I know it's early. You get up and listen anyway. You can catch us there every other Sunday on WFXC, WFXK. You can hear Dr. Kurt Smith is going to be with us coming up to talk about that losing land and how that's adversely impacting African Americans. He's a professor of forestry at NC State, but his expertise is in land loss amongst African Americans. Another person we got coming up is the football coach from Elizabeth City State, because Damar Hamlin, if everybody knows, the Buffalo Bills player who was hurt. We want to talk about the dangers of football, but also the whole licensing thing with college athletes, the reality of HBCU football and where it stands after the whole Dion thing and that kind of stuff. So we got that coming up. We got a person coming in to talk about estate planning and all kind of things. So this season is going to be action packed. And at least through the month of January, there's no reason for you not to be with us on the deal. So I want you to go and do something good for somebody this weekend for MLK Weekend. Volunteer, do something, find a family that you can help, or help yourself. If you haven't been doing that, do something for yourself if you haven't been doing that. So subscribe. Again, on all the platforms, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you can find podcast. And we're going to ask you to, Cherelle, this is one of the things we do on the show that everybody has to do it before the end. You got to tell us something you're working on, something that we need to know. What do we need to know, or something you're working on that's coming up in the next week?
In the next week.
Yes, it has to be in the next week. That's the rule.
Okay, coming up in the next week. Oh gosh. Okay, I'm just trying to get through the day. The day it's one of those days. The next week, what's coming up? What's next week?
Next week.
You know, one of the things, okay, so what's coming up next week? You just talked about helping someone or volunteering. I'm actually reaching out to a friend of mine who feeds, they have a massive feed on MLK Day. And I volunteered 2 years ago. I want to say I'm a little confused with COVID, you know, these years run together, but I think it was 2 years ago because of the outbreak last year. It just ramped up and they weren't able to do it. But I'm reaching out because I want to either do that or find somewhere that's very similar to be able to kind of give back. And I loved it. They just drove through, popped the trunk, we put it in there. And it was a great day to catch up with a lot of people that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I probably won't see all year, but be able to catch up and to be able to help those that needed the help. And so no judgment of anything, just good fun of helping people.
See, there you go. See how easy that was? So now you'll be prepared the next time. You got to have something that you're working on for the next week. So I don't have to say it though. I don't have to make of it. It's only the person sitting in the other seat. Anyway, I will end it there. But again, go out, do something good for somebody for MLK Weekend. Come back with us next week on The Deal, and then next Sunday on Connections. And then we want to thank Katie Lawson for also giving us some time this week. We'll see you next time. You've been watching The Deal. Thank you. Bye.